The Oversight Subcommittee of the House Judiciary Committee will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. We welcome everyone to today's hearing on the examination of threats to operations being performed by the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement, otherwise known as ICE. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from the state of Texas, Brandon Gill, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. After that, we will remain standing for a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moment of silence. I will now recognize myself for an opening statement. We are here today for one reason, because the American people are watching their leaders. They're watching their leaders at every level of government, and they're watching those who choose to protect illegal alien criminals over their own law-abiding citizens. It's not rhetoric. It's not hyperbole. It's not a Republican talking point. It's just fact. Let me be very clear. This is not about politics. This is about public safety. This is about law and order. This is about whether the United States of America still has the will to enforce its own laws. We're coming out of the largest border crisis in American history, and the American people continue to live with the consequences every single day. During Joe Biden's presidency, more than 8 million aliens crossed the southwest border illegally, and that's at a minimum. There are probably many more. There are a lot of numbers out there, but we know at least that many. 6 million of them were released into the country. They were given legal advice. They were given food. They were given education. They were given transportation. They were given shelter, and in some cases, even debit cards, all on the American taxpayer's dime. And at least 1.9 million gotaways crossed the border and escaped law enforcement altogether. Didn't even know who they all are and where they all are living. The open southwest border created a drug crisis, a human smuggling crisis, and a violent crime crisis. Unfortunately, none of this was by accident. It happened because the Biden-Harris administration chose chaos over control, ideology over enforcement of the law, and politics over the American people. The numbers just don't show a crisis. They show a full-scale collapse of our sovereignty, our security, and the very idea that a nation without borders is still a nation at all. The worst part of it all is that it just didn't happen. It was designed. On day one of his presidency, the Biden-Harris administration canceled border wall construction, day one. It gutted the Remain in Mexico policy. It abused immigration patrol authorities to release hundreds, thousands of illegal aliens into our communities. It virtually stopped enforcing immigration laws on the interior of the United States, which resulted in more than 60 arrests during the first few months of the administration. And the Biden-Harris administration turned a blind eye to the spread of violent gangs like Tren de Agua and MS-13 across the country. The result? Terrorists on watch lists entering our country, criminals with prior convictions for violent crimes such as assault, rape, murder, being released instead of removed, and an immigration enforcement system overwhelmed, underfunded, and pushed well beyond its limits. The only bright side of this chaos is that the American people made their choices overwhelmingly clear by rejecting these chaotic and terrible policies. They removed President Biden and Border Czar Harris and gave Republicans control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And now, President Trump is back in office and finally doing what should have been done years ago, restoring order, rebuilding capacity, and demanding accountability. But he inherited a system that has been pushed past its breaking point. ICE has more than 7.6 million aliens on the non-detained docket, up 135% since the day that Biden took office. Agents are scrambling to track dangerous individuals who should have been deported long ago. Right now, ICE needs more detention space than it ever did. But the same voices that created this chaos are now trying to shut down the very detention facilities that are needed to fix it. That's why this hearing matters. From New York to California, local politicians are actively working to undermine federal immigration enforcement. Perhaps the most egregious effort is in my home state, the great state of New Jersey. And we're going to play a quick video now showing this.
You cannot
An ambulance there apparently turned away at the ICE detention center in Newark.
We've seen at least 2 ambulances try to pull into this ICE detention facility here in Newark, New Jersey, and they turned that ambulance away.
The detention facility holds members of MS-13, murderers, arsonists, drug traffickers, American killers.
We want freedom. Free our people. This is sacred ground. Free our people. This is not a legal facility.
On May 1st, Delaney Hall, a 1,000-bed detention facility in Newark, New Jersey, was officially reopened. It houses illegal aliens charged with crimes like rape, murder, burglary, and weapons offenses. Facilities like Delaney Hall are desperately needed to help prevent dangerous criminal aliens from remaining on our streets, on your streets. The reopening of Delaney drastically expanded ICE's detention capacity in the Northeast and enhanced the agency's ability to manage the increasing number of enforcement and removal operations of illegal aliens in our country. Despite the severity of their crimes and illegal status in our country, those being detained at Delaney Hall are treated with dignity and are housed in a facility that exceeds the standards of many of our own U.S. prisons. It has clean dorms. It has indoor and outdoor recreation areas. It has mental health services, and medical services. It has phones, webcams, and consular access. And yet from the moment Delaney Hall was reauthorized to operate as a detention facility, it has been under constant, relentless political assault. Local officials have used inspections, lawsuits, and bureaucratic hurdles as weapons. Not to make the facility was operational, but to completely shut it down. Outside of the facility, there have been coordinated protests led by political figures, including Newark, New Jersey's own mayor, who publicly vowed to, quote, padlock the building if necessary, and declared that immigration enforcement of criminals is not welcome in his city. This isn't oversight. That's not oversight. That's obstruction. There's a big difference. It's lawfare designed to undermine federal authorities and score political points at the expense of our public safety. On May 9th, the tension culminated in a shameful display by the mayor of Newark, New Jersey, and members of Congress who stormed into the facility without clearance, without following protocol, and physically disrupted law enforcement operations. They cursed at staff. They shoved past security. They assaulted federal law enforcement officers. And for what? To free whom? Criminals? I'm going to show some more pictures. So the question I have, was it to free Hugo de la Torre Tomia, wanted for prosecution in Peru for the crime of raping a minor? He's wanted in Peru. Was it to free Jorge Luis Sanchez Luna, a Mexican national who is a registered sex offender who sexually assaulted his own daughter? Or was it Lopez Reyes, a Mexican national who's wanted in Mexico? They want him back in Mexico. He's a fugitive for the offense of raping a child, raping a minor. There are hundreds of other awful, horrible individuals like these men currently being arrested in New Jersey, and they're being held at Delaney Hall. And they should be. They should be. So let's be honest. Who exactly are the Democrats fighting for here? This is the part I don't get. Because it isn't the American people. It sure as hell is not the American people. And notably, the very next day after the altercation at Delaney Hall, Mayor Baraka's super PAC, for those of you that don't know, that's a way to raise money, lots and lots of money, released campaign ads touting his efforts to stand up to this agenda as part of his run for governor. It's obvious what happened here. This wasn't about the detainees. It wasn't about law and order. It wasn't about American people. It wasn't about all those marginalized people who get hurt because they live in and around all of this, marginalized Americans. It was about politics, pure and simple. Maybe not so pure. Mayor Baraka was mayor of Newark when Delaney Hall, and I want everybody to listen to this, Mayor Baraka was mayor of Newark when Delaney Hall operated under President Barack Obama. He was the mayor, President Obama was the president. This very facility was operated under that administration. There were no protests, no walkouts, no stunts, no altercations, no attacks, nothing at all. But now that President Trump is back and the American people have rejected the insanity of happening an open border, now the mayor and his friends in Congress are outraged. Give me a break. Let's call this what it is, an orchestrated campaign to protect illegal alien criminals and to sabotage federal law enforcement. Just say that one more time. It's a campaign to protect not illegals even, but illegal criminals, violent criminals that also have broken the law because they are here illegally. So when Democrats say they're just trying to help by raiding federal facilities, remember what this really means. They want ICE agents gone and out of the way. You have to believe they want criminal aliens free on our streets. And they're willing to risk public safety, sabotage law enforcement, and lie to the American people. You can't stand for law and order while voting to hurt the police. You can't say you're for border security while sabotaging every single tool that works. Let me be very clear. Delaney Hall is not the problem. Delaney Hall is part of the solution. The real problem is the radical left-wing agenda that sides with criminals over citizens, activists over agents, and chaos over common sense. To the men and women of ICE, this committee has your back. To the communities of New Jersey and the Northeast and the United States of America, we will not let your safety become a political casualty. And to the American people, we hear you. We hear you loud and clear. You want a country that protects its citizens. You want a system that upholds the law. And you want a government that chooses order, not anarchy. That's exactly what House Republicans are fighting for. And I promise you, we will win this fight against left-wing chaos. And I thank you. Just before we start and move forward, I want to address one other thing. We're going to have a hearing today, and sometimes it's going to be contentious. Sometimes it's going to be hot. Sometimes we'll be argumentative. That's part of America. Now, you all just listen, but up here. But at the same time, let us respect each other. Let's not speak about our demeanor, our dress, our physical stature, our hair, whatever in God's name people think of. This is the Judiciary Committee, and we're going to run this on both sides of the aisle in an appropriate way. We're going to run this like ladies and gentlemen that profoundly disagree on an issue. I now recognize the ranking member, Ms. Crockett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, I have my prepared remarks, and we're going to get to them at some point. But there was a lot that was said, including the fact that Delaney Hall is something that was opened up under Obama, and seemingly the mayor at the time did not have issues with Delaney Hall. I can tell you that there was a point in time in which Alcatraz was open as well, and there seemingly weren't any issues. The fact is, as the mayor of any city, I want to be clear that there is a duty, and that duty is to make sure that any and every building that is opened in that city is up to code. So just because something may have been up to code in 2008 doesn't mean that in 2025 that it was up to code. And there are those that should respect the authority of the city in which they are operating in. And somehow, during the later hours of last night, we saw that while the mayor had been unlawfully charged, those charges ended up being dropped. The mayor of the largest city in the state of New Jersey was charged with criminal trespass. Now, we have video footage, and I'm not going to play it, but we have video footage of literally them opening the gate and then asking him to leave, and then he left. Therefore, there is no criminal trespass. But the reason that I bring it up is because this entire situation could have been avoided if people just would know their jobs and actually do their jobs. Because the entire chaos that ensued, it ensued because of the unlawful detainment and arrest of the mayor in the first place. But let me get to my actual remarks. The Republicans have called today's hearing for one purpose: to help an administration that's already rooted in lawlessness and corruption execute their dangerous assault on American democracy. So in today's hearing, you'll hear them admonish their own congressional colleagues and excuse the behavior of the out-of-control, corrupt Trump administration. They're going to try to convince you that they're here to protect law and order and the rule of law. But they won't mention how the Trump administration is openly defying many of the 162 court rulings that have paused his illegal executive orders. They won't talk about how the president has called for the impeachment of judges who rule against him, or how they're allowing ICE agents to raid churches and elementary schools. They won't talk about how they're allowing Trump to purge the Department of Justice of employees who helped investigate the January 6th insurrectionists. They won't talk about how this administration is preparing to give $5 million to the family of Ashley Babbitt, who participated in said insurrection, because they don't actually care about law and order and the rule of law. They're here today for one reason: to forfeit their constitutional oversight responsibilities. But since I decided to bring up January 6th, let me run a tape to remind y'all of the difference of congressional oversight versus criminals.
We're here conducting an oversight visit, which we have the power to do as congressional members. Statutory authority, and so that is what we're here for, and we're waiting to speak to a supervisor to let us in here because
back to you, Mayor.
It's interesting that one set of behavior somehow is going to get a family rich overnight. And the other folk that were there in that video, the members of Congress, well, they're saying arrest them. Let me remind you that those January 6ers have been pardoned. Let me remind you that yet another January 6er was just arrested a few days ago for committing what? Another crime. So if we're going to talk about us keeping our streets safe, let's be real about who's causing crimes, who actually went through what we call due process, because no one denied the January 6th insurrectionists of their due process. They went to court, they either pled guilty or were found guilty, and they were sent to prison, and half of them, actually all of them, if their sentences said so, should still be in prison. Because we as Americans would be safer. We won't get into the fact that another one was already in trouble because they had already killed somebody. But I'll continue on. Right now, our Republican colleagues want to forfeit their constitutional oversight responsibilities. Let's talk about what's actually happening. In March, we learned that the Trump administration was dismantling the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties and terminating staff at the Office of the Citizenship and Immigration Services Ombudsman. And in the Office of Immigration Detention Ombudsman, because they argue, quote, these offices have obstructed immigration enforcement and, quote, undermined DHS's mission. The Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties investigates public complaints about possible violations of civil rights and civil liberties in DHS activities, including immigration enforcement and discrimination. And in the Immigration Detention Ombudsman's it is their primary responsibility to conduct oversight on conditions at immigration detention centers. So why would the Trump administration want to dismantle offices tasked with conducting oversight of immigration enforcement and detention facilities? The simple answer is, without them, there will be no internal oversight offices to assess the legality of the Trump administration's policies on immigration enforcement. So what have the results been? Since Trump took office on January 20th, 9 detainees have died in ICE custody. In fact, in Trump's first month in office, more detainees died in ICE custody than at any time since fiscal year 2020. Congressional Democrats have engaged in oversight activities of immigration facilities across the country, from Florida, where a 44-year-old Haitian woman died in ICE custody, to Newark, New Jersey, where 3 of our Democratic colleagues visited an immigration detention facility to ensure the humane treatment of detainees. This wasn't about going in and breaking nobody out, y'all, especially when there were cameras rolling everywhere. That's not what they were there to do. Now, in a breathtaking act of executive obstruction of congressional oversight and the unprecedented weaponization of the Department of Justice, we have an interim U.S. attorney for New Jersey who for years has argued in court that Donald Trump is above the law. She has announced criminal charges against Congresswoman McIver for, quote, impeding and interfering with law enforcement. However, our power as members of Congress to conduct oversight is found in the Constitution and federal law. In fact, federal law explicitly prohibits DHS from, quote, preventing a member of Congress from entering for the purpose of conducting oversight any facility operated by or for the Department of Homeland Security used to detain or otherwise house aliens, or to make any temporary modification at any such facility that in any way alters what is observed by a visiting member of Congress. It is against the law. Full stop. Separately, The court has consistently held that the speech and debate clause of the Constitution protects individual members from prosecution for legislative acts, including, quote, fact-finding, field investigations, and information gathering. The court has consistently held that the primary purpose of the speech and debate clause is to, quote, prevent intimidation by the executive and before a possibly hostile judiciary. So let's call this for what it is. This administration is criminalizing legislative oversight, and the Republicans on this committee are helping them to do so. Rep. McIver didn't engage in interference. It was ICE that engaged in interference while members of Congress attempted to conduct legitimate oversight of ICE facilities. Everyone, whether you are American or not, should be deeply disturbed and worried about Trump's abuse of power. They're attacking universities for teaching things they don't like. They're attacking law firms for representing clients that they don't like. This hearing and these charges are an attempt at political intimidation. The 3 members in Newark were exercising their constitutional duties to check an out-of-control executive branch. This entire situation happened because of the unjust arrest of Mayor Baraka. And not only were the members invited in and given a tour of the facility, this was after they so-called had broken the law. Now, I don't know about y'all, but where I'm from in Texas, I can tell you that I'm not used to having law enforcement see a crime happen right in front of their faces and then say, never mind, we'll just go about our business. In fact, why don't you go ahead and come on in? Come on in, we gonna do this tour because, oops, we did make a mistake because technically by law, we are supposed to allow you in. And wait a minute, while you're here, do y'all want something to drink? We got refreshments for you as well. And then after you conduct this oversight, and you actually gave a clean bill of health because you were never there to disrupt, you were always there to do your duty. They came out and they said, everything looks good. And then it wasn't at that moment that they decided to arrest members. It wasn't the next day. In fact, even as I sit here today, no member has been arrested. Now you tell me how many times you can see the robber go in the bank, steal the money, and then they say, well, never mind, we'll think about this later. That is what you call politicizing. And that is what we are here to talk about is wrong. But we got a few other issues with ICE right now, so I'm gonna get to them in a second. The DOJ, as I said already, has already dropped the charges against the mayor. Look, they're coming after everyone who uses their constitutional rights and duties to speak truth to power. The press, the courts, and now members of Congress. And to be perfectly honest, I had my team do the research. Under no other president, Democrat or Republican, can we find an incident where they have tried to arrest members of Congress. This is absolutely absurd that they were out there simply doing their duty. We have never seen ICE act in this way. In fact, it's not less oversight that we need right now, it's more. In fact, I'm gonna tell you, actually, I'm not gonna tell you. I can show you better than I can tell you. Roll the tape.
Shocking video showing the moment ICE agents smashed a car window and forcibly removed a man in New Bedford. 29-year-old Juan Francisco Mendez has no criminal record and was...
Stop, ma'am! Stop! Stop!
Definitely a chaotic scene on Eureka Street Thursday as Worcester police and ICE agents detained a mother and her 16-year-old daughter. That girl's face slammed into the ground as she was taken into custody. They have not been identified. Worcester police said officers were dispatched to the area for a report of a federal agent surrounded by about 24 people. When police arrived, they say the teen daughter was...
Agents smashed his window and dragged him out while his small children cried in the back seat and his partner recorded the incident.
You can't tell me that somebody in this building shouldn't do their jobs. because these people are out of control. You're talking about arresting members of Congress? These masked agents are running around acting this way? This is not okay. This shouldn't be about politics. We all should be on the same side saying we will not stand for this type of activity, but instead, they want to pretend like it's members of Congress that are the thugs. It's members of Congress that are the ones that are stoking this kind of violence. Let me tell you what those members of Congress were doing. They were trying to make sure that there would not be another mother that would lose her life in ICE custody as it was Mother's Day weekend. They decided that they just wanted to make sure that people were safe because that is who we are supposed to be in this country. And honestly, for anybody that considers themselves to be a Christian, they should care about treating people in a humane way. And they should also care about due process. Everyone in this country under our Constitution is due process. With that, I will yield.
Ranking member yields back. With that, I'll now recognize the chairman of the full committee, the whole committee, Chairman Jim Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's be clear. Republicans have been consistent. We've condemned violence every time it happened, whether it was last week in New Jersey, whether it was January 6th, whether it was the summer of 2020. Every single time we said if there's violence, it's wrong. Been nice if the other side had done the same thing. Summer 2020, holy cow. Police being attacked all over the place. What are they doing? Raising money to bail out the bad guys while they're talking about defunding the police. So don't give me this that somehow we're being inconsistent. We have condemned it every single time. 4 years and 4 months ago today, January 20th, 2021, Joe Biden made 3 decisions that created this mess in our country that we've had to deal with. He said, we're no longer going to build a wall. We're no longer going to have remain in Mexico. And when you get here, you will not be detained. You will be released. Guess what? Everybody came. Go figure. 8 million people came into the country. 6 million people were released. Thank goodness for President Trump and his administration. Elected on this issue. And already his administration has deported over 135,000 criminal illegal aliens. CFPB and Coast Guard have seized 232,000 pounds of drugs at our southern border, and the FBI has arrested suspected MS-13 gang members, including high-ranking members in New York and Virginia. That's what enforcing our immigration laws looks like. That's what the president campaigned on. People have been in there. We had the situation in Denver where the illegal alien was in for auto theft, charged with auto theft, aggravated assault, and they said, we're not going to release him to ICE. ICE had sent a detainer saying, give us 48 hours, heads up. They gave him 40 minutes. They had to arrest the guy in the parking lot, and an ICE agent gets injured. They had to tase. It was bad for the migrant, bad for the law enforcement, endangers the public. But that's what left-wing policies do. Sanctuary cities, then it was sanctuary states, whole states, sanctuary states, and saying, we're not going to work with federal law enforcement. Then it was judges letting the bad guy out the back door while the good guys are coming in the front door to arrest him. And now we find out it could even be members of Congress. That's what we saw at Delaney Hall a couple weeks ago. It wasn't congressional oversight. ICE has an important job to do, and God bless the men and women who serve in ICE. They got a tough job. I know we got some here, been there. They got a hard job, and agitators who obstruct them from doing that part of their job are part of the problem. So I'm going to thank our witnesses for being here today. I want to thank the chairman for his good work in this subcommittee and on this issue in particular, and I yield back.
Chairman yields back, and I was remiss. I want to thank the witnesses for being here today as well. We appreciate you and your time. With that, I will yield to the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Raskin, for his opening statement.
Thank you kindly, Chairman Van Drew, and for your opening statement. This week's events show how MAGA has turned American justice completely upside down and inside out. Over the last week, we've been talking about a single rogue DOJ employee who unilaterally canceled more than $500 million in Department of Justice grants to local law enforcement and victims' rights organizations and those assisting the victims of rape and sexual assault across the country. That's what right-wing policies do. I would say to my friend, the chair of the full committee. We tried to restore that money. Nobody seemed to know how any of this happened, but our colleagues didn't utter a word against our amendment, and yet they all voted against it. What else happened? Well, a 33-year-old January 6 rioter who assaulted our police officers at the Capitol, and he smashed the glass pane through which Ashley Babbitt climbed before she was fatally shot by a Capitol officer, was arrested again yesterday. This time they got him for burglarizing neighbors' homes. This was a guy who was pardoned by President Trump, now robbing houses in Virginia. This Zachary Alam was serving an 8-year sentence after a jury convicted him of 7 criminal felonies and 3 misdemeanors when President Trump granted him clemency as part of the mass pardon of 1,600 insurrectionists and rioters for the thousands of crimes committed on that day. At sentencing, U.S. District Court Judge Friedrich described the testimony of police who recalled Alam as, quote, by far the loudest, most combative, and most violent of the January 6 rioters who attacked the police in the part of the Capitol that these officers were defending. And yesterday, the Trump Department of Justice agreed to pay nearly $5 million to the family of Ashley Babbitt, the rioter who tried to storm the House Speaker's lobby on January 6 after she broke into the Capitol and after the aforementioned Mr. Alam broke that window. The Department of Justice originally took the position that her wrongful death lawsuit brought by her family was wholly without merit, no basis, and that Babbitt's civil rights had never been violated by the police, and that the police officer acted reasonably in defense of members of Congress and in defense of Vice President Pence. A Capitol Police investigation cleared the officer involved, saying his actions at the height of the riot, quote, potentially saved members and staff from serious injury and possible death from a large crowd of rioters who had forced their way into the Capitol, into the House chamber, where members and staff were steps away. In 2023, then House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said, I think the police officer did his job. Now, although Trump's new attorney general is set to give $5 million to the rioter's family, Trump has not proposed to give a penny to the more than 140 police officers injured, wounded, hospitalized, disfigured, and or disabled in their violence, and nothing to their families. He's proposed no money payments to the bereaved family of Officer Brian Sicknick, an Army veteran with 2 tours abroad who died at age 42 here on January 7th, 2021, the very next day after being brutalized by rioters. The decision to give millions of dollars to the Babbitt family and nothing to the families of the police officers who defended this Capitol, who defended us, exacerbates the insult of Speaker Johnson's continuing refusal to hang a simple plaque in honor of the officers who defended the Capitol and the Congress and the Vice President. A plaque mandated by law and now more than 2 years overdue on the West Front of the Capitol. The Speaker's stubborn refusal to respect the law is craven submission to the executive branch, to Donald Trump, who wants to pretend that the rampaging mob that he sent to Congress was made up of patriotic heroes and that the people he pardoned were, quote, hostages and, quote, political prisoners. A hostage is someone who's been illegally abducted by a terrorist group like Hamas and held for a financial or political ransom. A political prisoner is someone like Alexei Navalny or Nelson Mandela, who's been imprisoned for ideological reasons, not for violently assaulting the police or engaging in seditious conspiracy or destroying federal property. But the administration's effort to create big news yesterday was Trump's acting U.S. attorney in New Jersey, a blatantly partisan prosecutor who has bragged about working to turn New Jersey red. Well, she announced her intention to indict our colleague, Congresswoman LaMonica McIver, on charges of assaulting resisting, and obstructing law enforcement based on the now famous May 9th incident outside of Delaney Hall, an ICE detention facility in McIver's district, where she was conducting a scheduled oversight visit with other members of Congress, including our 80-year-old colleague, Bonnie Watson Coleman, and the mayor of Newark. Well, Delaney Hall is operated by the private prison company GEO, a major Republican donor that gave $1 million to Make America Great Again, Inc., and has faced numerous lawsuits for its treatment of detainees in unsafe conditions. The members had a lawful right to be there and to investigate, and even after ICE initiated a scuffle to arrest the mayor of Newark on public property, the House members were let in to tour the facility to conduct nonviolent oversight, and the tour went smoothly. This indictment is a manifest fraud, clearly designed to distract America this week from the administration's savage and unpopular effort to strip 14 million Americans of their Medicaid and health coverage and 11 million Americans of Head Start, Meals on Wheels, and other nutritional assistance programs like SNAP. Representative McIver was, of course, executing one of the core duties of a member of Congress, oversight, pursuant to her precise statutory right to enter and visit an ICE facility. The Supreme Court has repeatedly held that oversight is a central element of the legislative process, because if we can't research the facts on the ground, we don't know what laws to pass. This, for the Department of Justice to charge McIver with assault, is an outrage against the Constitution, which protects members of Congress from civil and criminal prosecution for performance of their core legislative duties. It is also a scandal in light of the DOJ's constant backing of cop-beating insurrectionists, including with the shocking policy that these pardons can even apply to criminal charges wholly unrelated to the events of January 6th, as well as the DOJ's jaw-dropping decision to fire more than a dozen senior criminal prosecutors simply because they had worked on the January 6th case. Yet now we've got colleagues who celebrate January 6 insurrectionists actually calling for prosecution of members of the House for doing their jobs. Representative Buddy Carter called our colleagues rioters. Representative Bishop actually said this was an insurrection. I didn't know that was in his vocabulary, but this was an insurrection, and he said it was a debacle worse than 9/11. No police officers or ICE agents were injured at Delaney Hall. No one died. No one had a heart attack like Officer Fanone did. There were no strokes. There were no broken jaws, no broken necks. Nobody was forced out of police work like Sergeant Gonell was. Yet we've got members of Congress who would gladly jettison the speech and debate clause, which protects all of us in our work, the First Amendment, and the Article I powers of Congress to score a few cheap political points at the expense of their own colleagues. In Trump world, violent insurrectionists and cop-beating extremists are heroes. They're martyrs. They're patriots. Members of Congress performing oversight functions are criminals and insurrectionists. And veteran criminal prosecutors of January 6 felons are fired, so Donald Trump can continue to pander to his private militia of pardoned rioters and insurrectionists, and a reserve army of extremists who've proven themselves willing to stand back and stand by. Let me show you what a real assault on police officers looks like. If you'd roll the tape. Mr. Chairman, if this is an oversight hearing on ICE and ICE believes a real assault took place in New Jersey, where are they? Why are they not present today? The star of the show is absent, and that, my friends, is no oversight. I yield back.
Ranking member of the full committee yields back. Without objection, Ms. Dove from California and Mr. Garcia from Illinois are permitted to participate in today's hearings for the purpose of questioning the witnesses if a member yields them time for that purpose, and that is true for both Republican and Democrat. With that being said, without objection, all opening statements will be included in the record. We will now introduce today's witnesses. Mr. Andrew Arthur. Mr. Arthur is a resident fellow in Law and Policy at the Center for Immigration Studies. He previously served as an immigration judge for nearly 9 years, as a House staffer, including for this committee and with the Department of Justice. Mr. Charles Marino. Mr. Marino is a former senior law enforcement advisor at the Department of Homeland Security to then Secretary Janet Napolitano, and the founder and CEO of Sentinel, a security and intelligence advisory firm. He is an adjunct professor of national security at the University of South Carolina. Mr. Scott Mikowski. Mr. Mikowski is a retired law enforcement officer who served more than 24 years with what was then called the Immigration and Naturalization Services. Don't mean to date you. And U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. When he retired, Mr. Mikowski was serving as the Deputy Director of ICE in the city of New York. Mr. Jason Hauser. Mr. Hauser previously served as Chief of Staff of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement from 2021 to 2023. Prior to that, he served as a senior advisor to the Commissioner at Customs and Border Protection, as an Assistant Director for Legislative Affairs, and as Deputy Chief of Staff at the Department of Homeland Security. We are going to begin by swearing you all in today. Would you please rise and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Please know that your written testimony will be entered into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, we ask that you summarize your testimony in 5 minutes. Mr. Arthur, you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Van Drew, Ranking Member Crockett, Chairman Jordan, and Ranking Member Raskin, thank you for inviting me here today. In June, I'll mark my 33rd year of immigration practice. Many of the issues we'll discuss today have been constant during that period, though others are more novel. One constant is the power of the legislative branch to decide which foreign nationals should be admitted, which should be removed, and which should be detained. The executive branch is duty-bound to faithfully execute those laws, and until late, consistently did so. It was the refusal of the last administration to detain migrants whom it was required to remove, and its granting entry to those Congress expressly stated were inadmissible, that triggered the largest migration crisis in this country's history, and that facilitated the entry of nearly 8 million clearly inadmissible aliens, most of whom remain. Consequently, the center estimates roughly 15.4 million aliens subject to removal are in the United States today. Polls and post-election analysis indicate the 2024 election was a referendum on those policies, with the American people demanding the removal of those here illegally. The best proof of this support is the bipartisan passage of the Lake and Riley Act, the first law passed in this Congress, which constrained border and port releases, but more importantly, forced the executive to comply with Congress's criminal detention mandates. The Trump administration has responded with a three-pronged program to drive down the unauthorized population. One, a massive border security effort with Mexico's assistance. Two, high-profile operations to apprehend and detain criminal aliens in the interior. And three, encouraging those here illegally to self-deport. Many elected officials at the state, local, and federal levels have pushed back against interior enforcement, however. The Biden administration argued that strict enforcement impeded its efforts to advance, quote, equity for all, close quote, and many of the president's opponents appear to agree. They also argued that the means the administration is using to enforce the laws have created fear and disrupted communities. It's common for those wanted by the authorities to be anxious, but to the degree these operations focus on criminals for whom detention and removal is mandated, those operations make communities, and immigrant communities in particular, safer. Regardless, just last week, Arlington County, Virginia, site of a September 11th terror attack targeting the Pentagon, in which 184 innocent people were murdered, barred local police from notifying ICE whenever those local police arrest terrorists and human traffickers. Arlington is far from the only so-called sanctuary jurisdiction. Numerous officials I spoke to in California when I was there last month complained about the public safety implications of that state's sanctuary law, SB 54, which hamstrings state and local officers in assisting ICE. By law, states and localities are barred from prohibiting their cops from communicating with ICE, and yet that is the purpose of many of those sanctuary policies. Likely the most short-sighted sanctuary schemes, however, attempt to bar ICE from detaining immigrants in state and private facilities in their jurisdictions. The upshot of such policies is that the agency instead must detain those aliens in more enforcement-friendly jurisdictions far away from their families and their attorneys. Respectfully, the heated rhetoric surrounding enforcement is endangering our immigration officers. 6 days ago, 2 men were arrested on a criminal complaint alleging they caused a car chase in downtown Los Angeles that impeded and endangered ICE officers. Just yesterday, in my home state of North Carolina, a man appeared in court on charges that he, quote, threatened to kill ICE agents and Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department officers if immigration enforcement actions did not stop, close quote. If this continues, people, ICE officers, members of the public, those who seek to impede immigration efforts are going to get hurt and possibly killed. But this rancor shows no sign of abating. The immigration laws mandate that certain aliens, criminals in particular, be arrested, detained, prosecuted, and usually removed. So long as those laws remain on the books, it's the duty of DHS to fully, faithfully, and yes, safely and humanely enforce those laws. Efforts to challenge such enforcement should be limited to Congress and the courts and in peaceful discourse and must not risk the lives of the officers themselves or the public as a whole. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Jordan, Chairman Van Drew, Ranking Member Raskin, and Ranking Member Crockett, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today to testify regarding the numerous current threats to ICE operations as the agency, along with law enforcement throughout the entirety of the federal government, works diligently to ensure the homeland security of the United States and the safety of the American public. As a former career official with the Department of Homeland Security, working under both Republican and Democratic leadership to help protect the country by creating and implementing Homeland Security policies and programs, I am keenly aware of the ever-present dynamics between politics and the creation of national security strategy, especially in the areas of border security and immigration enforcement. I continue my work in national security today as the CEO of Sentinel, a global risk and intelligence consulting firm, and as an adjunct professor at the University of South Carolina, teaching future generations the impact of politics on the development of national security strategy. The current volume of threats against the United States remains robust in volume, more diverse in type, and originates from more places than at any time in our history. And while the threat environment is constantly evolving, what must remain consistent as an essential foundation to secure the homeland is the indisputable need for border security, immigration enforcement, and thorough end-to-end vetting of those entering the U.S. to prevent criminal and terrorist threats from entering the country. Unfortunately, the border and immigration policies of the previous administration have undoubtedly made the country less safe by allowing very dangerous criminals and national security threats to enter the country, directly undercutting the very purpose for creating the Department of Homeland Security, subverting the statutory responsibilities of the Border Patrol, ICE, and practically every other agency tasked with protecting the homeland, and making their jobs exponentially more dangerous. In addition to these known and in some cases unknown physical violent threats to the everyday mission of law enforcement and the American people, we are also dealing with the impact of politics on a mission that should universally be supported, enforcing the law in the effort to safeguard the country. Inept policies and political positions of sanctuary cities, for example, which fly in the face of common sense when it comes to protecting law-abiding citizens, also creates more dangerous conditions for federal agents enforcing the immigration laws of the country and for all of law enforcement for that matter. Political positions of not allowing state and local law enforcement to support ICE operations, no cash bail, and the release of violent repeat offenders, including those in the country illegally who should be prioritized for deportation, creates a protective shield for the most dangerous criminals from other countries in the U.S. illegally. It also endangers lives when politicians alert their communities of ICE operations or when they offer guidance to illegal migrants regarding how to evade ICE. It also further promotes to the community that in some cases they may do the same. There must be bipartisan agreement when it comes to the protection of the country and support for those who enforce the rule of law, for no civilized society has survived without it. There must also be universal consensus that despite political policy objections, elected officials at all levels must be held accountable when crossing the red line of obstruction and assault of law enforcement officials. What we saw in New Jersey at Delaney Hall Detention Center was not congressional oversight. It was an ambush, and it was violent obstruction, and it cannot be tolerated by this body. As I've discussed, there are enough threats against this country, against law-abiding citizens, and the ability to safely conduct ICE operations. There should not be additional threats originating from elected leaders against those doing their jobs, a job that the American people voted overwhelmingly in favor of them doing. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Marino. Mr. Mikowski, you may begin.
Good morning, Chairman Van Drew, Ranking Member Crockett, Chairman Jordan, and Ranking Member Raskin. I'm honored to appear before you today. My name is Scott Mikowski, and I proudly served this nation for 2 decades as a law enforcement officer and with the United States military. I retired from service from DHS in 2018 as a Deputy Field Office Director in New York City. My views are personal, shaped by 24 years of frontline duty and 34 years in the U.S. Army. Today, I speak not just from experience, but from urgency. ICE detention centers and ERO's mission are not optional. They are essential to the rule of law. Without them, our immigration system and our communities collapse into chaos. ERO's mission is straightforward: protect communities by arresting, removing individuals who pose threat to public safety or who violate federal immigration law. I spent years intelligence-driven and supported by strong federal infrastructure and funding, including detention beds. Immigration detention is not punitive. It is a lawful tool to ensure compliance with immigration proceedings and final orders of removal. Yet 1.4 million of those ordered removed are still roaming free, a population that drives the need for more bed space. Over 60% of ICE's detained population is held under mandatory detention laws. Individuals with criminal records, flight risks, and even those that pose threat to national security. Detention is about guaranteeing aliens appear in court and that their rights are respected. It's also important to note that attorneys, family members can visit families and provide support, and that removal orders, once lawful and final, can be carried out safely, responsibly. Effective GPS monitoring, known as the ISAP program, is useful to ensure high-risk cases are able to be held in detention when detention beds are fully utilized. Now let's talk about Newark. What occurred at Delaney Hall in Newark recently was not civil disobedience, it was chaos. I've seen this before in New York. I personally witnessed a high-profile arrest spiral into pandemonium when protesters, misinformed and misled, physically blocked a medically necessary EMS transfer. They endangered the detainee's life, the officer's life, the general public's life, and ICE personnel. The Newark protest, which led to the arrest of sitting Mayor Ras Baraka, echoed that same recklessness. These actions just don't disrupt operations. They escalate risk, threaten lives, and turn lawful enforcement into a spectacle. Protest is a constitutional right. Interfering with lawful enforcement is not. Local non-cooperation laws, including sanctuary city policies, compound this threat. When local authorities refuse to share information or deny access, it drives enforcement into uncontrolled environments. Homes, streets, workplaces. And that's where the danger really multiplies. It also increases costs and delays removal while weakening victim protections, intelligence sharing, and court coordination. Consider this. Nearly 8 million aliens are on the non-detained docket today. Fewer than 50,000 are in custody. When we demonize detention or defund its alternatives, we paralyze the system. We hand over the reins to not justice, but chaos. To the members of the subcommittee, I urge you to look beyond the rhetoric. The men and women of ICE are doing a job that was mandated by Congress. Acting Director for ICE, Todd Lyons, has been relentless in his efforts atop an agency that was abolished from within by the last administration. He's maximizing limited resources to enforce law again, as Congress intended. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCaskey. Mr. Hauser, you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ranking member, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm here to speak plainly about something I care deeply about: the safety and integrity of ICE officers who serve our country on the front lines of immigration enforcement. I had the honor and privilege of serving as ICE Chief of Staff during a time of immense pressure and operational demand. I've seen firsthand the complexity and danger of the job. ICE officers perform their duties with courage, and they deserve policies that support, not endanger them. Unfortunately, that is not what is happening today. The current administration has expanded interior enforcement in ways that not just are overreaching, but are reckless. They're targeting people without criminal records, shutting down legal pathways, and revoking protections. The result? More arrests of non-criminals. These numbers might look good on press releases, but they put officers at greater risk, erode public trust in the agency, and make real enforcement harder. ICE operations are the most complex in federal law enforcement and should be respected. A simple arrest in ICE does not equate directly to more detained in ICE custody. Additionally, it does not equate cleanly to removals, and this sort of narrative needs to be stopped. The White House is driving directives and policy through political theater. This is short-sighted and dangerous. It stirs backlash that makes it harder for ICE to go after actual threats, violent offenders, cartel members, and traffickers, and it doesn't stop there. The administration is pulling in officers from other agencies from across the federal law enforcement, CBP, and the Department of Homeland Security, creating gaps. And those officers are not highly skilled or trained in interior immigration enforcement. That weakens our border security and turns immigration enforcement into a shell game. Worse still, ICE is now expected to take on and manage a vast expansion of cooperation and oversight of local law enforcement carrying out immigration enforcement. This expansion creates confusion, legal risk, and potential for real harm. It expands the administrative burdens on ICE officers and takes them away from their public safety operations. All of this is stressing our resources and making the system more chaotic. Beds in detention centers are limited. When they're filled with non-criminals, that space isn't there for dangerous offenders. We clog the system with cases that go nowhere because many of these individuals can't even be removed. They're protected by law, have claims pending, or come from countries that won't take them back. It's not enforcement, it's theater. It's a churn that misleads the public, burns out the workforce, and accomplishes very little. Let me be clear. I support vigorous enforcement within ICE. However, strength comes from strategy, not rounding up the wrong people for the wrong reasons. When ICE is turned into a blunt political tool, officers are the ones who suffer, much like we saw at Delaney Hall. They're the face the public sees. They're the ones caught on video. When a mother is arrested in front of her kids, it's the officer, not the policymaker, who carries out that weight. This undermines morale within ICE, it damages trust, and it puts lives in danger. So what can we do? Congress has a role, and the subcommittee can help restore balance and safety. We need to codify enforcement priorities so officers focus on real threats. We must prohibit untrained law enforcement officers that are not trained in immigration enforcement from carrying out ICE and ERO's job. We must require ICE to adopt modern transparency tools like body-worn cameras, like we saw it used at Delaney Hall. We also need to support programs that reduce the need for at-large arrests, protecting the officer and the migrants. And we also must protect ICE officers from threats, specifically like doxing, with real legal safeguards. We also need to stop pulling agents from vital investigations, like human trafficking and drug smuggling, to chase landscapers and line cooks that do not have final orders of removal and are most likely from countries that they cannot be removed to. In short, ICE needs a clear mission, one based on law, safety, and common sense, not political showmanship. I'm proud of the men and women who I served with at ICE, and I would serve them again. They deserve better, and the American people deserve an immigration system that works for everyone. We owe that to the taxpayer. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hauser. We're now going to proceed under the 5-minute rule with questions. I will start by recognizing the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly appreciate all the witnesses being here today. During Trump's first 100 days, ICE arrested 67,000 illegal aliens and removed almost 66,000 from this country. Of those, almost 50,000 were criminal illegal aliens, either with a criminal record or facing criminal charges. Mr. Arthur, what categories of aliens are generally held in ICE detention?
Generally, it's criminals, individuals who are subject to mandatory detention because of crimes under Sections 236C and 241A2, in addition to individuals who are apprehended entering the United States subject to mandatory detention under Section 235B.
Okay, and Mr. Murkowski, this may be something, I don't know, you maybe can help me understand, but my understanding was when folks came across the border here, the background check we didn't really go back to their home country. So how do we eventually identify those? In other words, we're looking for crimes they committed in the United States, but we don't know if from Guatemala, wherever they came from. How is it that we eventually figure that out, and why is it that we don't know when they're coming? Mr. Bukowski or Mr. Arthur, either one, Morena, whoever may have the answer to that.
Well, the problem has been the lack of thorough vetting for any of these illegal migrants that have been allowed to come into the United States. So never mind the countries of origin that oftentimes can't be verified. We don't even know who these individuals are. And we know that trickles down all the way to the unaccompanied minors. With the lack of DNA testing that was done away with early in the Biden administration, we now have, well over 350,000 that are missing within the interior of the country. So this becomes a guessing game now for authorities who are trying to rectify this system under the Trump administration. It's challenging. And then when you finally do discover the countries of origin, sometimes they don't want to accept these illegal migrants back.
One thing I found fairly interesting is when I went to the border, we saw thousands of IDs thrown down south of the border. So in other words, folks coming in, they had an ID in hand and they tossed it on the ground before they come across, and talking about the 350,000 children that the Biden administration lost. We don't know where they're at, what they're being trafficked into. But I had an individual who came across, he was 31 years old. He identified as an unaccompanied minor and raped a 14-year-old girl in a restaurant, in a restroom. And he already had a criminal record, but it's amazing to me that we didn't know his record when he came here. But then when you go see the border and you see all these thousands of IDs laying across that southern border, they don't want you to know who they are when they're coming here. And so, Mr. Arthur, why are these ICE detention centers, why are they so very important?
ICE detention is absolutely crucial for the enforcement of the law. ICE detention serves the two purposes: one, ensuring that individuals will show up for their immigration proceedings and their removal, but more importantly, to ensure that individuals who pose a danger to the community aren't allowed to be in the community while we go through that process. In fact, any individual who is eligible for bond can ask for bond if they don't have a crime. They can ask for bond from an immigration judge. I heard thousands of these cases. If they didn't pose a danger to the community and they weren't a flight risk, they were eligible for bond. Otherwise, they'd be detained because they're not going to show up.
Mr. Bukowski, you said you retired in 2018 from ICE. What was it like then compared to what you've heard from your colleagues in the last few years? How does the morale, what's going on, and what are they seeing on the streets?
Thank you for the question, sir. My experience was ICE officers are out there every day doing a job that Congress mandated. It's codified. I mean, there's funding for it. There's directives that come directly from Congress. And the men and women are out there every single day. And
so when you say codified, it's the law.
Yes, sir.
And so it always amazes me that how when we're enforcing certain laws, everybody comes up in arms. But to me, it's just a matter of we are trying to enforce the laws on the books. You guys, the officers on the street, are trying to do what Congress has mandated. So what are you seeing with the morale now? Was it better? I assume it would have been better in 2018.
Yes, sir. They felt under the last administration they were totally abandoned, left out to dry. It was a field day. They weren't doing their jobs. They were sitting there. Nobody really cared. Meaning the people there felt like ICE was literally abolished without an actual order from Congress abolishing ICE.
So I'm running out of time, but so the same party that wanted to defund the police have basically attacked ICE for doing their job.
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman from Alabama leads back. I will recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've got a lot of people out here in the audience, and if you came in support, to show your support for Representative LaMonica McIver, would you stand up, please? Okay, that looks like around 60 folks. Thank y'all for coming, and you may be seated. And let the record reflect, Mr. Chairman, the vast number of people who came in support of Representative LaMonica McIver.
Without objection.
The Trump administration has weaponized justice, using the Department of Injustice to carry forward an assault on liberty. Trump has threatened and intimidated a number of lawyers and powerful law firms into submission. He has put powerful institutions of higher learning under his thumb, and he has forced powerful media companies to bow down and kiss his ring. Now he's threatening and trying to intimidate his adversaries in elective office. Last month, Trump's Department of Injustice arrested a female judge doing her job at the courthouse in Milwaukee. They then arrested the mayor of Newark, in the same city that he leads. And now, yesterday, they have filed charges against a member of the House of Representatives. And today, we are engaged in a pre-planned hearing entitled, quote, "Examining Threats to ICE Operations," end quote, while producing a highly prejudicial, expertly edited video published to taint the jury pool and shape a false narrative on Representative McIver's actions. MAGA Republicans are using this hearing to justify the charges against her. And in support of the charges, they publish more video that demonizes people being held in private, for-profit ICE detention facilities. What is really happening is that Trump and his MAGA enablers are misusing their positions of power to prosecute people who refuse to lay down and get run over as they assault our liberties. And they are trying to intimidate members of Congress from performing our duties. That's why we are really here today. Last night, Trump's personal attorney, who he appointed to be interim United States Attorney for New Jersey, blatantly abused her authority to target a sitting Congresswoman who had been roughed up by armed, mask-wearing ICE agents, males. This interim U.S. attorney targeted my colleague, but just because Representative McIver had the audacity to do her job rather than taking the Trump administration's word that everything was fine. Members of Congress have the legal authority to visit ICE facilities so that we can perform oversight. It's one of the things we are elected to do. But this administration has become increasingly authoritarian and will not tolerate anyone asking questions. That's why Trump and my Republican colleagues call for the impeachment of any judge who rules against this administration. It is why the Trump administration targets students who expressed dissent. And it's why Trump muzzled the big law firms that previously stood up for civil liberties and have now agreed to stay quiet and do his bidding. The Trump administration continues to abandon the Constitution, and the Department of Justice continues to politicize the pursuit of justice. They've come after judges, mayors, members of Congress, and our neighbors and our communities. Who's next? Is it you? Representative McIver has her legal rights. They threaten her, and in threatening her, they threaten us. No one is safe once you can be targeted just for asking questions and trying to ensure that the government is following the law. Now, Mr. Hauser, right now our MAGA Republicans are trying to pass a massive spending bill that would increase the national debt by $3.3 trillion and give ICE a staggering $73 billion to build more private, for-profit detention facilities. Can you please explain how this massive cash infusion, and especially the $45 billion expansion of immigration detention, is neither wise, strategic, or safe?
Sir, it clearly shows the need for oversight as they expand detention. You're going to outsize the need of what ICE actually needs operationally. Additionally, it will take deportation officers off the streets and now will be in these facilities, so actually making us less safe. Additionally, the idea that you're going to detain 100 to 150,000 people and spend $45 billion or $70 billion to do it, if you took that same money and just put it to fix the broken immigration system now, you could hire thousands of individuals that could be adjudicating cases, immigration judges, resettlement services. Sir, quite frankly, you could give a couple $2 billion to a country to take some of the migrants back themselves and they would go. The idea that you're going to put this into detention and that will fix the system is a bit absurd.
Well, they want the billions.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Political supporters' pocketbooks.
The gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman yields back. Okay, and I recognize the gentleman from the great state of Texas, Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing today on what I believe to be one of the most, probably the most important issue that our country faces right now, which is illegal immigration. Mr. Hauser, I've got a few questions for you. You were Chief of Staff for ICE, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What years were you there?
2021 to 2023.
So that was during the Biden administration, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Got it. So presumably you're well-versed in border security and immigration enforcement, is that right?
Yes, sir. I would say that I'm very aware. I also worked at CBP under the Obama administration. Yes, sir.
Got it. So you've got a lot of experience there. I'm going to ask you a few questions. In an interview with the Daily Blast on February 28th, 2024, you mentioned, quote, "You can't deter and punish your way to lowering encounters at the border," end quote. Do you think you were right or wrong about that?
100%, sir. What we've seen.
100% what? Right or wrong?
100% I was correct.
You were correct about that.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The idea that you just dismantle an immigration system is not, there was a mandate to the Trump administration.
Illegal alien border encounters are down 95% right now. I think you were wrong about that. You also said, quote, the idea that you can turn off the border is just not factual. Do you think that was right or wrong?
Sir, the threats that we're still seeing across the border.
Do you think you were right or
named
wrong
those
about
numbers
that
earlier.
statement?
What's that, sir?
My question is, were you right or wrong about that statement?
When you
That
turn
can
off
just
the
turn off
immigration
border?
system, sir, yes, you will not see encounters. Yes.
Well, southwestern border encounters are at a 15-year low under President Trump. Another thing that you mentioned, quote, just shutting off the border to asylum seekers is not going to do that, meaning close the border. What I think is going to do that is make it more erratic and sporadic for the sort of large surges of migrants you would see coming across the border. Do you think that was right or wrong?
100% correct. It was correct, sir. We're going to see that over the next couple years. Yes, sir.
Border apprehensions are down now because President Trump has secured our border. He's stopped the flow of illegal aliens coming across our border and coming to our border. Do you think that we have a better or worse border situation now than we did under Joe Biden?
Sir, I believe the border is secure.
You believe the border is secure, that's right. But you were wrong about a lot of other things, about what would secure the border, is that right?
No, sir, it's only been 100 days.
You were wrong about what it would take to stop the flow of illegal aliens coming into the United States. You were wrong that secure enforcement that we're seeing under President Trump would stop the flow of illegal aliens. You ought to keep that in mind as you're going to the media and mouthing off about the president.
Can I answer that question?
Let me ask you another question. This is from a New York Times op-ed that you wrote just a month ago.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned, quote, federal law enforcement under President Trump is engaged in dangerous political theater. What about President Trump's law enforcement do you think is dangerous political theater? Do you think that
Sir, I think
seizing
setting quotas,
235,000 pounds of
quotas
fentanyl
by
at the
political
border is
appointees in the
dangerous
White
political
House
theater?
is a problem.
Do you think seizing fentanyl at our border is dangerous political theater? Do you know who Gilberto Avila Jara is?
So that's exactly where ICE should have their resources focused. That's exactly where
And
this
we
administration
did, and
is
he was
beginning to turn
arrested
them away
last
from.
month and charged with over 20 sex crimes against minors.
Yes, sir.
These were the kind of people that Joe
Taking
Biden
2,000
and
CBP
under your
officers off the
leadership were
border
coming
over
into
the
our
next
country.
3 months doesn't make us more safe. Taking HSI agents away from drug interdiction, and
Taking murderers and
trafficking,
rapists
human
off our
smuggling
streets makes the American
doesn't make us
people more safe. It's your testimony that taking murderers and rapists off our streets does not make us more safe?
What I'm saying,
is that what
sir,
you're
is
telling
over,
me?
what we have heard from this administration is over the next few months, there's going to be thousands of law enforcement focused on non-criminal migrants.
We'll see.
instead
You
of
were
the
you were
exact
wrong
same
about a
threats
lot
we
of
both
things. I don't
agree
put a
over.
whole lot of stock into that, candidly, and I don't think the American people do either. Do you support amnesty?
No, sir.
Do you support amnesty for illegal aliens?
No, sir.
In this New York Times article, you wrote, quote, that means that the best solution for public safety is not mass deportations.
No, I
it's giving
support
undocumented,
focused
I'm
immigration support
speaking
for
right
migrants
now.
that need
This is my
protection
time,
under our
not
law.
yours. I'm speaking. It's giving undocumented immigrants who have been in the United States for a long time the opportunity to come forward, pay a fine, and gain legal status. That
Yes, sir.
sounds a lot like amnesty to me, doesn't it, to
It's
you?
a process, sir, under the law that could exercise and allow them for
That's
migrants to come out of
amnesty.
the shadows and then focus. ICE
That's what
officers on
amnesty
real
is. This
public
is
safety.
a deliberate semantic obfuscation, and you know it, and I know it, and the American people know it as
it's not,
well. Do you think that illegal aliens should be given welfare once they get amnesty?
Sir, that's not my department.
You've got a lot of opinions on a whole lot of different things. You don't have an opinion
Areas
on that?
where I've worked for 20 years, sir. Yes, sir.
And finally, let me ask you, do you think that Biden was successful at stopping illegal immigration?
There was failures at the beginning of the Biden administration to deal with the flow of migrants post-COVID, and then there was failures of implementation of policies across all of the immigration system. That's the same problems we're seeing now. The idea that you can enforce your way out of immigration and the challenges that we see across the Western Hemisphere, it's not going to work.
We had an open border under Biden. The border's secure now. I think that's a successful Trump policy and a failure of the Biden administration. I yield my time back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. With that, stay tuned. You ready?
As ready as I'm going to be.
No, okay. I yield to the gentlelady from the great state of Texas, the ranking member of the subcommittee, Ms. Crockett.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Hauser, Thank you so much for your service. I do want to make sure that we are clear on your credentials because you actually have them. I have that you were the Assistant Director of Legislative Affairs at Homeland Security, correct?
At one time, yes, ma'am, about 15 years ago.
You were Deputy Chief of Staff at Homeland as well?
Yes, ma'am.
You served as a Senior Advisor to the Commission as Homeland's Custom and Border Protections,
Yes, ma'am.
as well as you recently served as the Chief of Staff for ICE.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you've done a few things.
I'm also a combat veteran. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, thank you for your service in all ways. Here, listen, I have a series of issues of what's going on because I will say that the Republicans were right. Democrats lost on immigration. When you look at all the polling, when you talk to people, they lost on immigration. And frankly, I am concerned that we did not have conversations that went beyond just talking about the humanity, because there are people that literally don't care about humanity, which is why we are able to have this administration doing the things that they're doing. Talking about the fact that border crossings are down 95%, well, I don't know if I can trust that number or not. You know why? Because first of all, they've been going out, they've been firing all of the persons that usually deal with data, science, and facts all over in all agencies, in addition to the fact that even if that is a real number, we don't know if they got to that number just because, well, this is a lawless administration that is consistently in violation of people's constitutional rights, the Constitution in and of itself, court orders. So we can't really explain exactly why and how, even if that is true. And at some point in time, you have to say there is a balancing test. Either we are going to follow the law fully or we're not at all. And frankly, what I've seen out of this administration is that they don't want to follow the law. But there is something that you said in your opening remarks that really stuck with me. There was a line that I wrote down. You said line cooks and landscapers. Now, I have talked to those that are in construction. I have talked to those that are farmers. I have talked to a lot of people that have said that because of the reckless acts of so many of these ICE agents, they can't even get their workers to show up to work because of what they're doing. Now, you correct me if I'm wrong. As somebody that practiced criminal law, I never saw that we needed ICE to go and arrest somebody, say, for murder. Is ICE the only agency that has the authority to arrest somebody, say, if they go out and commit murder?
No, ma'am, they're not. But
what about aggravated robbery?
No, ma'am.
What about rape?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so in fact, 9 times out of 10, the primary arresting agency when it comes to, say, committing a crime such as aggravated robbery, rape, murder, would that be ICE? Would that be the primary arresting and investigatory agency to do that in the first place?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right, so I just wanted to make sure I was on the right page because I get a little confused sometimes when we're around here. Now, we have talked about a lot of the kind of back and forth between the branches. And this idea of checks and balances seems to escape certain folk in the chamber. And so I really want to ask you just a couple of questions to make sure I'm not the one that has lost my marbles. Who has the right to conduct oversight? Or let me ask you this way. Does Congress have the power to conduct federal oversight over detention facilities?
Yes, ma'am, and quite frankly, a bit of confusion that I've been hearing today. Oversight by Congress is, of course, mandated by law, but additionally, oversight also not only in the immigration space protects the migrants, but also protects law enforcement and through public safety in making sure they have the resources they need. In my position, over 15 years at the department, I oversaw hundreds of visits by congressional members, advocacy groups, immigration groups, law enforcement groups, and in no way did I ever see the sort of situation that we saw in Delaney Hall where there was a powder keg driven by the political theater being driven by the White House.
That's exactly right. And that's actually why I wanted to make sure I talked about the fact that you had credentials and you've actually been in this space. That was not normal. And the idea that they would somehow say that it's their colleagues that were the ones that were driving it, which is why I made sure that I showed video footage of Representative McIver very calmly telling them why she was there. And frankly, it is sad that we do have to go through this kind of political theater because, listen, we all know what it is. That's why they hired everybody from Fox News, because all they trying to do is put on for a show. This is not the Apprentice show. This is supposed to be about the American people, and I want us to start to refocus our attention on the American people and stop demonizing every daggone person that ends up in custody of ICE, because they are not necessarily demons just because ICE decided to round them up. So thank you for your testimony.
Can I answer that question?
No. The gentle lady yields back. The committee will be in order. I understand your enthusiasm, but we have rules in the way we run the committee for both sides of the aisle. With that being said, I will recognize the gentleman from the great state of Ohio, the chairman of the whole Judiciary Committee, Congressman Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mikowski, who are all these people in ICE detention facilities that Democrats went on the street? Who are these folks? Are they all just apple pie asylum-seeking folks, or who else might be in there?
Sir, thank you for the question. First and foremost, they're immigration law violators. They violated the basic laws, the immigration laws that are codified by Congress. I'll say it again.
So they broke the law?
Yes, sir. That's first and foremost. They're not a United States citizen.
Any of them violent? In addition to breaking the law, any of them violent people inside these detention centers?
Absolutely, sir.
Any of them gang members?
Absolutely, sir.
Any of them members of MS-13?
Absolutely, sir.
Any of them Trendy Aragua gang members?
Again, sir, yes.
So they're not just all warm and fuzzy folks that the Democrats want out on the street, right? They're bad guys. Some of them are bad guys, really bad guys. Now, some of them are just asylum seekers, but some of them are really bad guys. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir, it's fair to say.
Yeah, because you worked in these facilities, is that right?
I've worked in them, sir, yes.
You know them better than anyone in this hearing room. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and before they go to detention, they have to get apprehended somewhere. They have to get arrested or taken into custody by ICE. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
You got to get them somewhere. You know, maybe it's on the border, maybe it's somewhere else. But you have to get them before you take them to the ICE detention facility.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, did you ever think that you would see Democrat mayors in all kinds of urban areas around this country and Democrat city councils pass resolutions say, don't work with ICE when they come to apprehend gang members, bad guys, MS-13 violent offenders? Did you ever think you'd see that?
Not here in the United States, sir.
But that's exactly what's happening around the country, isn't it?
Yes, sir. In my home state of New Jersey, that's fact.
Yeah, it's happening everywhere. New Jersey, Denver, Boston, you name it. It's happening. And did you ever think you'd see governors and state legislatures do the same thing and say, you know what? Our whole darn state is going to be a sanctuary state. Don't work with ICE when they're coming to enforce the law. Did you ever think you'd see that?
No, sir.
Did you ever think you would see judges in their chambers tell the bad guy, hey, talk to his lawyer, hey, slip out the back door because the ICE agents are coming in the front door to enforce federal law? Did you ever think you'd see that?
No, sir.
And did you ever think you would see what happened last week or 2 weeks ago, I should say, in New Jersey? Did you ever think you'd see members of Congress engage in that kind of behavior?
Sir, after what I witnessed in 2018, yes, in New York City, I didn't put it past anybody, but I find that behavior to be absurd.
Well, in other words, Mr. McCall, it's gotten so bad, nothing surprises you now with what the left's going to do.
Nothing, sir.
I know, and that's where the American people are, and that's why they appreciate what the Trump administration is doing. Why is it better to arrest people at the jails or at the courthouse, Mr. Mikowski, than it is out on the street? Why is that better?
Well, I believe my colleague had touched on it, but it's much safer for the alien, the person involved, and it's also safer for the general public. Most importantly, the officers. The rule of thumb is safety first.
It's safer for everyone, right?
Yes, sir.
It's safer for everyone. Safer for the migrant, safer for law enforcement, safer for the general public, because you don't want to happen what has happened already because of the crazy left-wing policies that some of these cities and states and now judges have. When you could send two, it's cheaper for the taxpayers. Instead of sending 6 guys to arrest them on the street, you can send 2 guys to get him at the courthouse or at the jail. But that side says no. We're for the sanctuary policies. We're for making it tougher on law enforcement. We're for endangering the community. We're for making it tougher on the migrant and going out and arresting them on the street. Really, one of the craziest things I've ever heard. Would you agree, Mr. Murkowski?
Yes, sir. And to your point, we talk about sanctuary cities, and my colleague was mentioning like deportation officers need to be on the street. Imagine if they would just honor detainers, they rolled over into custody, and I could send people over there to pick them up in a facility, not taking the officers away from an enforcement action. Okay, so deportation officers are very vital.
Yes.
And you know, the peaceful transfer from one facility to the other is just common sense, sir.
No, we call that, in economics, you call that opportunity cost, right? Because it's safer for the officer, safer for the public, safer for the migrant, but it also, when you have to send 6 of them out on the street, there's the opportunity lost that you now have 4 extra agents there when they could be out doing other good work protecting the public. That's how dumb, there's no other word for it, how dumb this whole sanctuary policy is. Thank you for your work.
The chairman from Ohio yields back. I recognize the gentleman, the ranking member from the great state of Maryland, Mr. Raskin.
And thank you, Chairman Van Drew. Even ICE and the Department of Homeland Security recognize that, quote, any member of Congress has the right to show up for an inspection at one of our facilities in their oversight capability. Mr. Hauser, is that the general policy that you know?
Yes, sir.
Okay. ICE has also, along with lots of other parts of the administration, has been repudiated by the federal judiciary, including the Supreme Court. There are now more than 160 preliminary injunctions and temporary restraining orders that have been entered by federal judges, Republican appointees, Democratic appointees against a reign of lawlessness and complete disregard for the Constitution. President Trump has had to be instructed to bring back a man who the Department of Justice admitted had been deported due to an administrative error. He was sent to a torturer's prison in El Salvador due to what they confessed was administrative error. Do you agree that ICE has been violating the law repeatedly over the last few months?
Sir, I would say the administration and the White House has been directing lawless action.
The U.S. Supreme Court even had to issue an emergency order at 1 in the morning on April 19th to stop an unlawful attempt by the administration to conduct a mass deportation of Venezuelans without any due process whatsoever. They told them to turn the vans and the buses around. There had been no hearings, no opportunity to be represented, no opportunity to hear even the charges against them, no court orders. And just this last Friday, the Supreme Court upheld this ban on deportations, reaffirming once again that every immigrant in the country is entitled to due process. The two most beautiful words in the English language. It's due process that separates our rights and freedoms from arbitrary power by the state. And if you have a single libertarian bone in your body, you will understand what due process is all about. Now, why is congressional oversight important, Mr. Hauser, if the courts are there as a backstop against lawlessness by an executive branch?
Sir, Congress's role, especially in immigration enforcement, is extremely critical for just the simple fact that we have tens of thousands of human beings in custody. And their care and the carrying out of our public safety and our law enforcement operations need critical oversight and accountability.
So when you were chief of staff at ICE, how many congressional delegations would you say happened at ICE facilities?
Hundreds, sir. And as we've all talked about, we saw large demands and migratory flow to the border. We were dealing with bipartisan, visits continuously week after week.
These were Democrats and Republicans together coming to visit. So there's nothing strange about members of Congress doing it. Both parties have done it, right?
No, sir.
Did anything like what just occurred at Delaney Hall, where members of Congress were pushed and manhandled and threatened with arrest, and there was a melee, did anything like that ever happen in your experience?
No, sir. And what I saw there was sort of this distilling of what I consider the direction of enforcement, immigration enforcement, in the political theater of this. That was the outcome that some people in the White House wanted. And they're putting that pressure both on the non-migrants that are non-criminal, that don't have final order removal, and also on the ICE officers.
Well, you mentioned the phrase political theater several times, and that's interesting to me because I remember at the end of the Biden administration when there was a struggle to get the two parties together and there was agreement, a bipartisan agreement on legislation at the border. And you had the most conservative Republicans in the Senate hailing it and saying it's a huge breakthrough. You had liberal Democrats getting behind it, and everybody was saying, well, it's not perfect, but we'll do this. And it was sailing through the Senate, it's coming over to the House, and then President Trump, former President Trump at that point, announced he was totally opposed to it. He didn't want border legislation. He wanted a border crisis to run against. In other words, he wanted political theater. I wonder, was that your perception of that same episode?
Absolutely, sir. And when you watch the videos of what happened at Delaney Hall, ICE officers are trained from the beginning of when they enter the agency on assessing threat and risk. And clearly, and they sort of apply that threat and risk to what they carry out in operations. And I believe everybody on this panel would agree that then they allowed the Congresswoman to then enter the facility and take the tour. So the idea that there was outside political pressure or influence directed at ICE agents and that created this powder keg of what happened there is pretty clear and logical to me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time's up.
I thank the ranking member. I am going to yield 5 minutes to myself. So, I like to keep things simple sometimes. I'm from Jersey too. And sometimes simple truths really kind of display more complex truths as well. So I think there's a few simple truths. And I'm going to ask all of you, and I'm going to ask for a really quick, yes or no answer. I believe open borders, sanctuary cities, and sanctuary states where you're releasing individuals back into the community, including dangerous criminals who have been guilty and have committed crimes like rape on minors, like murder, like disfigurement, like dealing and selling drugs, just to name a few, like violating gun laws, all of that. I think that's really bad. I don't think we should let that happen. Let's really get down to what this is all about. In the last administration, we let people like that come across the border and come into the United States of America. Would you agree with me that that's bad? Mr. Arthur, quickly, yes or no?
Yes, I do, sir.
Mr. Marino, yes
Yes.
or no? Mr. Mikowski, yes or no?
Absolutely, sir.
Mr.
Yes.
Hauser, yes or
sir.
no? Okay, so that's something we've already done better on. We're straightening that out now. We are not allowing those individuals to come into the United States of America. Do you believe, as I do, that as members of Congress, and you can state this, don't be afraid to say it, that we have an added level of responsibility, the way that we comport ourselves, whether we are Republicans, whether we are Democrats, whatever we are, that we should behave in a certain fashion. We write laws. So you would believe that we would follow the rule and believe in the rule of law itself. So and I believe we do have oversight. It's a process. You behave a certain way. It doesn't mean that you agree with everybody. It doesn't mean you don't investigate, but that you as a member of Congress, as a congressman or a congresswoman, behave in an appropriate fashion lawfully, not in a combative assault type of way. Would you believe that that is true? Mr. Arthur, yes or no?
Yes, and I attempted to comport myself that way when I was in oversight council.
I'm sure you did. Mr. Marino, yes or no?
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Mikowski, yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hauser, yes or no?
Absolutely, sir. It's what the military...
So we saw the video. You saw the video. I don't have to say any words. Look at the video. Even all you who came here with a certain focus in your mind and were told to believe something, look at the video and see what it shows. That's all I'll say. Thirdly, do you think there's a financial effect on all of us in America while we debate the great issues of the day? How much should we spend? Where should we spend it? What should we do with the fiscal resources that we have, with the dollars that we bring in through taxation? Do you believe it's inappropriate to fund illegals, including illegal criminals, which we have? I could ask you that question. In fact, I'll ask a real question very quickly. In the past administration, did we at times fund illegal aliens? No, I'm sorry, illegal criminal aliens.
Absolutely.
Did we fund illegal criminal aliens?
Yes, sir.
Did we fund illegal criminal aliens in the last
Yes, sir.
administration? Did we, Mr. Hauser,
What
fund
does fund mean, sir? Like,
give them stuff, give them housing, give them clothing, give them transportation, give them education, give them, in some cases, debit cards. Did we do that?
we have provided resources to migrants
Right,
for
we
60
funded
years.
them.
60 years, sir.
We funded them. Not
The first
illegal
Trump
bad
administration.
people, we didn't. No, I disagree, and that's wrong. And would you believe that cost people? We don't even have to go into it. Of course it costs the taxpayer. Of course, when resources are sparse, and we'll argue about Medicaid and SNAP and all these things, how about we don't give money to people who are really bad people doing bad things, send them back to the country of origin? Maybe that's a good idea. And I did want to address the ranking member. Not the ranking member of the subcommittee, Mr. Raskin. He always loves to talk about the Senate bill, so I always have to talk about it as well. It was a bad bill. I didn't know, I knew it was a bad bill the minute we saw it in Judiciary. Had nothing to do with Donald Trump. It codified illegal aliens. It allowed up to 1.8 million to come into the country before anything was done. It did nothing about catch and release. It did nothing about the wall. It didn't rebuild the wall. It did nothing what in the past we had Title 42, and it didn't do anything about the Remain in Mexico policy. Now, real quickly, would you agree that some of those policies in the past administration were good, and that we really didn't need a whole lot more legislation, that we could have done it through the president at the time under the Biden administration? Yes or no?
Absolutely.
Mr. Marino,
Yes,
yes
sir.
or no? Mr. Mikowski, yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hauser,
Sir,
yes
can
or
you
no?
just give me the question one more time?
All the things that I just mentioned, all the things that could be done to protect our borders. We had the biggest disaster in border crossings in our American history. Couldn't have we had prevented that purely by presidential action, not by a faulty, bad Senate bill? I think you're going to see a good bill come out of this Congress.
Sir, I would
That
only
bill was a
state
bad
that this
bill.
is only the first 100 days. You're going to see border surges.
I didn't ask that
until-
question.
Until we don't need the Alien and Sedition Act to
What-
carry out
what are we-
immigration
nobody's
enforcement.
talking
We have
about
Title 8.
Do you believe that we could have done better in the Biden administration through presidential action than we did?
Sir, clearly.
Yes or no? Yes
at the
or
beginning,
no?
sir, there was mistakes.
Yes or no? Yeah, we screwed up. We did a bad job in the Biden administration. You know, I mean, even you've got to kind of admit that. And now we're trying to straighten out the mess. With that, I will yield back. And I yield to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Moskowitz. You may even have a joke or two for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a joke, just a quick clarification. The bill that he's talking about that was terrible was a Republican bill, so it's fine. It happens. I just a quick clarification of.
If it's bad, it's bad. I don't care what party.
No, I just wanted to remind people that it was a conservative, very conservative Republican senator who had drafted that bill. With that, I want to yield as much time as she may consume to the ranking member, Jasmine Crockett.
All right, Mr. Hauser, it's back to us. I like games every once in a while, and so I have some questions. The questions are going to be, is it political theater or progress? You ready? The first question is going to be, doing an executive order revoking birthright citizenship, political theater or progress?
Political theater, it doesn't help the mission of ICE.
Okay. How about revoking student visas?
It takes up the time of ICE officers and is political theater, and it takes away from the national security and public safety mission.
How about bashing car windows of people with no criminal record?
That's driven from quotas of arrests being driven by the White House. And that is politicization of ICE immigration enforcement, so it's political theater.
How about deporting people who are even citizens? That's not even deportation, but you know what I'm saying.
It's political theater, and I believe that this White House is getting the outcome, the reaction that they want and they desire.
How about arresting political opponents?
That would be political theater.
Yeah, so here's the deal. I know that you've been cut off a number of times as you have tried to give answers to various questions. Thank you so much for explaining that even this committee hearing is actually a bunch of political theater, because there's a lot of things that we could be talking about. We could be talking about the fact that we are currently in reconciliation, and while everyone else has been told to do things such as make sure that you take food out of people's mouths, make sure that you get rid of people's health care, make sure that you are harming our federal workers even more by making sure that the resources that they need to be able to do their job just kind of disappear. But at the same time, I think the way that Mr. Moskowitz figured it, it would be approximately $44,000 as it relates to a bonus for each ICE agent. Is that correct?
It's incorrect. It was 42,000.
Okay, my bad. But the reality is that we do have real problems. And I don't know how we're gonna get to real solutions if we continue to just make everything about politics. As it was properly outlined by the gentleman from Florida, that was a Republican bill. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, I wasn't really a big fan of the bill myself on my side. So I know that there was a lot of conservative stuff in that bill that was going to be harmful. And with that, I am gonna yield back to the gentleman from Florida.
Yeah, and I'm gonna yield time to the ranking member Judiciary in a second. Mr. Marino, on that topic of bonuses, just real quick, do you support ICE agents getting $42,000 worth of bonuses? There's $800 billion for bonuses. Okay. I say billion, I'm sorry, million, I apologize. $800 million in there for bonuses. Do you support that?
Yeah, what kind of bonuses are we talking about? Are we talking retention bonuses?
This is a great question, Mr. Marino. Great question. They didn't say at all in the backup. Yeah. There was no documentation at all what the bonuses were for or what it was just $800 million for bonuses. It sounded like a lot of money for federal employees for bonuses. Not that we don't want to treat our federal employees great, of course we do. But I had suggested $500 million for bonuses, and they said, no, $500 million sounds a little better, right?
Well, look.
Or zero. Are you at zero for bonuses, maybe?
I never received a $42,000 bonus.
Good, perfect, we agree. I would like
However, times are different. Recruiting is tougher. Retention is a challenge. And if that's something that it's needed for, I would support it.
So do you support those bonuses for NOAA, FEMA, the Pentagon, all of the departments, or just ICE?
I would support strategic use of retention bonuses where they were needed.
Okay. I'd like to yield the remainder of my time to Mr. Raskin.
Thank you, Mr. Moskowitz. Mr. Hauser introduced the important idea of political theater. You've introduced the idea of bureaucratic bloat. And our ranking member on the subcommittee has talked about the assault on the living standards of millions and millions of people in the country and their health care. I just want to add one final piece of this, which is that Donald Trump and his family have been making more than $1 billion a month since they got into office on the crypto scam, and now he's collecting a $400 million airplane from the dictator of Qatar. There is an absolute ripoff of the taxpayers taking place in a prostitution of the presidency. And I think that completes the picture for what's taking place in our country today. I yield back to the gentleman, and thank you.
And I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Florida yields. I recognize the gentleman from Missouri, Dr. Ronder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all our witnesses for being here. Mr. Hauser, thank you for your service to our country as a combat veteran. But no thank you to the Biden administration for precipitating the worst border crisis in American history. I would say that Joe Biden and his administration were incompetent, but I think it was intentional. It was intentional that he flooded at least 8 million illegal aliens into our country. And what is the Democrats' solution? The Democrats' solution seems to be, unless you've been convicted of a violent crime, you can stay. Not only can you stay, but we will pass amnesty bills to support you. We will block enforcement of immigration laws and endanger ICE officers with sanctuary city policies. We'll give you welfare. We'll give you health care. We'll give you free education. You know, if you want to come here as a birthright tourist, Your kids will be citizens, and that will help you to stay in the country permanently. We'll give you free stays at luxury hotels. Oh yeah, Biden and his administration have really done a great job. Donald Trump has lowered illegal border crossings by 95%. Somehow that doesn't count. There are going to be surges later on, don't you know? Well, you know, this all gets away from the purpose of this hearing, which is the fact that activist protests, including those by members of Congress, obstruct immigration enforcement and undermine public safety. In April and May alone, there were more than 14 demonstrations planned across 12 states targeting ICE detention centers and related facilities. These types of demonstrations physically impede ICE detention center operations on purpose and inhibit the successful processing of detained illegal aliens. And you know what? I do care whether illegal aliens have committed violent crimes, of course, but I think every illegal immigrant, as you've pointed out, Mr. Michkowski, has broken the law and needs to leave. And to me, due process is you prove that they're not here legally, they get the hell out of our country.
The gentleman yield for a friendly question.
No, I do not. It's my time. You've spoken about 4 times so far in this hearing. For example, on May 4th, 2025, activists protested an ICE field office as a detention bus left, with law enforcement agents forced to surround the bus to prevent interference, diverting staff from other duties and delaying detainee transfers. The protests directly impeded law enforcement, federal law, and put ICE officers at risk. Mr. Michkowski, do law enforcement officers and ICE officers, do they receive training how to deal with crowds and riots?
Sir, yes, sir, they do.
I'm sorry, is the time clock I don't know how much, I think I have some time left, but the time clock went black. Oh, there we go. Okay. How are ICE officials trained to react when a gate would be broken and stormed by a group of raucous protesters?
Sir, from what I saw in the video, I think they handled themselves the way they could, the best they could in that situation. I mean, what I saw was a lot of belly bumping from lawmakers, putting their hands on the officers, whether you agree or not agree. It's unlawful.
Yeah.
It shouldn't happen.
Well, there's assault and there's battery, and when you touch another person without their consent, that's battery. And battery of a law enforcement officer, is that a violation of the law?
Yes, sir.
Even if you're a member of Congress?
Yes, sir.
We members of Congress aren't above the law.
Absolutely, sir. And they were trying to protect maybe the facility. There was a lot of commotion there. Their number one concern at that moment is making sure nobody enters a secure environment and that could pose risk to a detainee or a congressperson or anybody else in that situation, sir.
Right, right. Why do DHS and ICE officers, why do they wear body cams?
Sir, can I answer that question?
Sure.
As Chief of Staff of ICE, I implemented the first policy for body-worn cameras, and they created a pilot within Homeland Security investigations to carry that out. That, in the last year, has been rescinded by the current administration.
Okay.
So they are not funding, and they are not moving forward with the body-worn camera program under the Trump administration. But I was glad to see, quite frankly, in the criminal complaint against the Congresswoman, that some of the officers still had their cameras on.
Yeah.
So hopefully this Congress
and we have footage
commit to fully
we have footage of officers being assaulted.
Mr. Under, if I could respond to that question.
Yes.
It's a twofold purpose. One, it protects the officer from any allegations that they engaged in violations of civil rights laws, and it also reminds the officer of the fact that somebody's always watching.
And Mr. Arthur, why do ICE officers occasionally wear masks?
ICE officers occasionally wear a mask because, unfortunately, in this heated environment, they get doxxed, they get attacked, they get threatened at their homes. People disclose where they live, disclose their phone numbers, where their children go to school.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you all for your testimony. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. That concludes today's hearing. We thank our witnesses.
Mr. Chairman, can I have a UC request? Is it okay?
Absolutely.
There's two articles. One is, this is a letter from members of the New Jersey delegation to the committee condemning efforts by the administration to politicize
Without
lawful
objection.
congressional oversight.
By the way, that's some of the New Jersey delegation.
Oh, from some members of the New Jersey delegation, yeah. And then this one is from the Washington Post. Elon Musk, enemy of open borders, launched his career as an illegal alien.
Without objection.
I've got a UC as well. This is from the Associated Press. President Trump's first 3 children did not receive birthright citizenship. This is an article that came out of the fact that Donald Trump Jr. as well as Eric and
Without
Ivanka
objection.
were born to a woman who was not a U.S. citizen at the time.
Without objection. It concludes today's hearing. We thank our witnesses for appearing before the subcommittee and spending their time with us. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witnesses or additional materials for the record. Without objection, this hearing is adjourned.